right, so man, I got a different type of podcast for y'all today. I have a special guest who I'm going to bring on. We're going to talk about tarot cards. She's going to explain the process to you, and I'm going to get mine read. You know, life is all about new experiences, and if you stay in your comfort zone too long, you know, you get comfortable. And I mean, that sounds so obvious, but you need a little bit of discomfort, especially in this world that we live in with so many different views on life, so many people arguing about stuff. So living in this polarizing world, the way you kind of bring people together, it's just by having conversations. It's by trying new things. And if you're not open to trying something, then I mean, you're part of the problem. But hey, it's the big baby, and I'm back. I love you, baby. I love you, baby. And I got a special guest, Miss Emily. How are you doing this morning?
Hello. Thank you, big baby. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for coming, man. You know, I'm all about, you know, diversifying the podcast, you know, talking about new stuff.
Yes. And I loved when we first connected that you were like, I'll try anything once.
Yeah.
Like, I'll try. Why not?
And when I tell you, there's very few things that I won't try one time, you know, but for the most part, like, I'm open to trying things. Like, I hate people who go, ew, that's nasty. Well, have you had it before? No, it's just sounds, well, it might be good if you try it.
Right.
So that's life. So, Emily, who is Emily Mcgill? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, gosh. Who am I? I like to say these days I'm a spiritual seeker. I'm a deep believer in the power of community. And I'm a recovering Broadway publicist.
Let's talk a little bit about being a recovering Broadway publicist.
Sure.
What was that lifestyle like?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. I loved it. You know, I always knew I wanted to work on Broadway. I grew up with this like singular ambition, Broadway or bust. I didn't know how I was going to work on Broadway. I went to school for performing, but even during that time knew that that wasn't going to be my path, that I wanted to be on the business side of the business. So I started interning when I first moved to New York City and ended up landing in a PR office when I forgot my first full-time job. And it was something that really came naturally to me. I enjoyed connecting with people. I enjoyed having conversations. I enjoyed helping amplify voices and getting the show out there into the world. And it was so cool. I got to do so many rad things in the time that I did that. And after a while, I was, you know, my boss shut down the company. I went to another company, did something similar. It's the same thing, but with plays instead of musicals. So I was getting to work with like Denzel Washington on A Raisin in the Sun, which was like a huge show. It was like the hit of the season. And it was just such an amazing learning experience. Also very difficult. And during that time, my grandmother passed away, which caused me to go to therapy for the first time. And so I started exploring. Initially, it was like, what do I do with myself now that this person who I was very close to, who was an incredibly complicated woman, now what do I do? She's not here anymore. So I started therapy and I got a different job. I started doing PR for I was the in-house Broadway person for a very sort of like traditional PR agency that worked with like corporate clients and Delta and, you know, all these different, much more like rigid, not really like creative sort of clients that I wasn't really used to. And so I was there for about 3.5 years and learned a lot, but also learned that I didn't want to do that. And how do I get back to theater? So I left there and I started my own company. And at that time, I also got hired by Disney to do the PR for The Lion King and Aladdin on Broadway. So I was like running my own business and doing those shows, which was a lot of fun because it was a temporary gig. I knew that I was only there for a set amount of time. And so, I was kind of like on this treadmill of this career path that I had sort of set myself down. And just before the pandemic hit, it was January of 2020. I had the best month to date in my business so far. And I could not have been more miserable. I had no idea how I ended up where I was. And so it was an opportunity. The pandemic became an opportunity for me to pause and reflect and reconsider, how did I get here? And where do I actually want to go?
That's so interesting because the pandemic, I think, was so eye-opening for a lot of us, especially for me, because I've been down a career path. How long I've been doing what I've been doing in my day job? I've been doing it for almost 8 years now, and we can talk a little bit more about it off mic. I just don't talk about my day job at all, like on the microphone. Sure. And when the pandemic hit, life slows down. You're working from home, and I started potting like on the regular because it's easier to book guests because people are at home.
Yeah.
And I'm not moving as fast. So it's like, hey, just put out another episode. Hey, put out another episode. Put out another episode. And I go, okay, I want to do this full time.
Yeah.
Now let's figure out a route to making this a full-time gig.
Yep.
Is it radio with a podcast on the side, or is it just podcasting, depending on, what that structure looks like? And I go, okay, I have this career obligation because of, just some financial benefits that make more sense to a certain point.
But also that were financial benefits that are imposed upon you by a society that has chosen those to be benefits. They're not necessarily beneficial to everyone. They seem to they're only beneficial under this particular system and structure that has decided that they are beneficial.
Exactly. And because of that, and some of it is just getting some student loan debt relief. I'm like, we're going to get this loan. We're going to get this relief, right?
Right. Because you're like, I still actually do live in this physical world. I still have to move through this system for the time being in order to navigate this human experience, to continue navigating it, right? Like I have to fall within these certain parameters to continue the process forward, so that those parameters eventually go away.
Exactly. So sorry to cut you off. And this is really, we're about to really get rolling here because, and just for anybody listening, we didn't do any like pre-show prep. We didn't talk about any topics. I love to shoot from the hip and have a real authentic conversation.
Same.
Because I'm somebody who can go to a bar and spark up a conversation. I like to do it on the podcast.
Right.
And
I like the structure of this too. I'm like, I know who I'm meeting. I know what time I'm meeting them. I know that we're going to have something to talk about. Yeah. I don't know what it's going to be, but I know that we're going to have an interesting, authentic, connected conversation.
Exactly. And, you talk about operating within the structure. And oftentimes I have conversations with people who may have an issue, especially with our hot issues, whether it's race, sexuality, gender, all these different things, right? That people don't like to talk about or are super polarizing.
Right.
So here's the structure in which we live in. Here's how you have to act in that structure. I don't agree that you should have to act this way if we're talking in a vacuum.
Right.
But life's not in a vacuum.
Right.
So once we put these once we are in the structure, you have to do this in order to survive within the structure. Now, if you want to rip it at its seams and create a new structure, then have at it. But don't be upset at somebody for surviving within the structure without acknowledging that this is what our structure creates,
Yes.
So what I'm getting from you is you like a little bit of structure, but you feel like you like left and right, and then let me fill in the blanks.
Absolutely.
Am I right there?
So I don't know how into astrology you are, but I'm a Cancer. So that means that I am very heart-centered. I'm like the mother of the zodiac, very nurturing, want to make sure that everyone is okay and taken care of. That things are comfortable, that they're homey, that I can be of service to the people that I love. But that also rolls into Virgo, which is also something that likes to be of service. And my moon's in Virgo. So that kind of means that I have some of like the shadowy versions of what that sign would hold. And so Virgo does like structure. It also likes stability. It likes to be of service. And so there's this idea of I like to have a structure in place so that I know how far I can push my boundaries. You know, that there's this thing where, you know, the idea of comfort zone has come up a lot lately around me.
Okay.
And a friend of a friend is just dropped a book, and her name's Terry Trespicio. She's incredible. And it's called Unfollow Your Passion. And she talks about how, like, sometimes we get stuck in this idea of passion. But another thing that she talks about that has felt more resonant for me even is this idea of you don't necessarily have to step outside of your comfort zone. You need to expand your comfort zone.
Oh, I like that.
So it's like, because you're not going to do something that, I mean, yes, thrill seekers love to do things that make them uncomfortable. And that is definitely a selection of humans that are like, yes, toss me outside of my comfort zone. And that adrenaline rush is like nothing I can get, right?
But that's still their comfort zone, because if you tell them to sit down somewhere and just chill,
they can't do it.
They can't do it.
Mm-hmm. And so this idea of like, you don't have to step completely outside of it, but like start pushing the boundary of what comfort is to you. So, you know, touch the edges of it and maybe have a conversation with someone you maybe don't see eye to eye with, or, you know, step into a part of town you don't usually go to, or go to a store that you don't usually, right? Like there can be tiny ways to sort of expand a comfort zone. Yeah. So that's something that I've been playing with lately.
That's good, because you don't know what you're capable of if you don't push yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
kind of on the same topic, right? I want to pitch something at you.
Okay.
The word love.
Mm-hmm.
It's for one, it's an overused word, if we're being honest. But if we're talking about love from a romantic point of view,
Okay.
and sometimes you will hear a hurt partner go, "If you loved me, you would not have done this."
Mm-hmm.
And I say, no, if you loved me, you would not have done what I did. But we all define love differently.
Mm-hmm.
And rarely is there a conversation about how I express love and how I want to receive love,
Right.
and how somebody else expresses it and wants to receive it. And we're using a vague word to define a very specific concept.
Sure. Are you familiar with the love languages?
Yes. Me and the old lady, we did the love languages test. We're actually due to redo it sometime in the near future, because we do it just to, like, you know,
Yeah,
stay
check
in.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Make sure I'm loving
Make
you the
sure
right
you're
way.
in alignment. Make sure that even if your primary way of expressing your love and your care for that person doesn't look the way that their primary preference to receive it does, if they understand that you're trying to do more of what aligns for them, and if they're able to recognize when you do what aligns for you, like that to me is love.
Exactly.
Or at least partnership.
Yeah, yes, and I just think that a lot of people just don't do those little things.
Sure.
We live off of attraction, and
Mm-hmm.
whether it's physical attraction, emotional attraction, you know, personalities, whatever it is, it's not that whole, yeah, attraction gets us here, but you got to maintain it, you know.
Right.
Yeah, when you buy a car, you still have to get the oil change, you still have to
Mm-hmm.
rotate your tires, you still have to put gas in it. You just don't buy it and drive, you know.
Right. You don't eat once. You have to eat every day, several meals a day.
Exactly. And I think the same should apply to your relationships, you know.
Yeah, and not just romantic, right? Like you could find that in any relationship. You can find that between parent and child, between siblings, between in-laws, between just your friends, your coworkers, your boss, right? Like you can find it everywhere. It's just a matter of like stepping up and being open to having uncomfortable, you know, maybe outside of your traditional comfort zone conversations, and saying, like, speaking up when you say this doesn't quite feel right, or that is I feel a certain way about that. I feel like you need to know that, right? Like and there are ways to do that without being in like a charged place, so that it doesn't come from an emotional experience. that it's just like, hey, this is just some information I want you to have.
Exactly. And so often it's difficult to have those conversations because for one, you're worried about how it's gonna land with that person.
Yeah.
And then also it's just not received the right way. It's like, hey, I'm pointing this out because I care, not because I'm an asshole.
Right, that the intention and the reception are not aligned.
Alignment. Well, let's get back to a little bit of your biographical information. Okay, you told me you moved to New York 15 years ago. Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Pittsburgh.
Okay, the Berg. Shout out to Wiz Khalifa.
That's right. Yep. And August Wilson. And I grew up there. My parents put me in dance class when I was 3. I started doing theater when I was 12. And I was just always in love with like the arts and entertainment. And and my sort of tarot and like spirituality journey kind of like intertwines with all of it. You know, I think that so often people try and sort of separate their personal life from their professional life. And that's not possible. I love you shaking your head. It's not possible. You're right. And like they, because we can't, the things that we do professionally are impacted by what's happening both in our personal life, in our personality, right? Like the work that we choose to do in the world, like that is all affected by who we are as a human. And you can't really move through the structures and systems that we have in place right now without, as a human, without having this sort of professional part to support with resources. And so that sort of like interwovenness, it feels like for me, like spirituality and like is another thread of that.
Okay, I like that. So what started you down this spiritual tarot journey that you're on?
It was my grandmother dying when she passed away. Yeah. And like I said, I started therapy at that time. And every now and again, I didn't really know what direction to take something, or if I had a question about something in therapy, my therapist would say, why don't we pull a card? And so she would get out a deck of tarot cards and I would pull a card. And, we would do that for a few years. And then at one point I was looking for a daily practice for myself. I didn't really have anything that I did every day just for me. And she said, why don't you start pulling a card? And I was like, well, I don't have a deck. Like, and I don't know, like that. Why would I? And she was like, well, you can download an app for your phone. It's super easy. And it was. The app's like $10, which, yes, a lot for an app, but not for a tarot deck, right?
I spit more for less.
Right. And so, so I'd get that little red bubble every morning telling me to pull a card, and I had to get rid of it. And so I would tap my card and find out sort of what my theme was for the day. And it was great because I could tap the screen and start learning the meanings of the card. Okay. And so it gave me that information. And then just before the pandemic, right around that time that I was like, how am I here? What am I doing? I was gifted my first physical deck, which was a deck of the same one that I had that app of, the Osho Zen Tarot deck. Okay. And that was my first one. And I started being able to read for other people, and the pandemic hit. So all of my readings went virtual. And I've been expanding the practice and doing more of it ever since. Been working on my own tarot deck to bring my love of Broadway into my love of tarot. So it's actually Broadway tarot. Okay. Using characters from Broadway shows as the different sort of representations of the archetypes in the tarot deck.
All right. That's super interesting. I was speaking about therapy on here a couple weeks ago because I consume a lot of social media, and I pull a lot of topics from that nonsense, and I do acknowledge that a lot of it's nonsense. And one of the topics was guys start podcasts instead of going to therapy, and I'm like, I do both. The podcast is therapeutic, but also having somebody to talk to is super important. And what a lot of people I think don't, what some people don't get about the whole therapy piece, right, is that hour you're in there, 30 minutes or however long your session is, it's great. but you got to take what happens in there and you have to live it, right?
Yeah.
So if you're an expressive human being and that hour is not going to allow you to get everything off your chest, you have to find different ways to go throughout throughout your day to express yourself, to let
Yep.
this stuff go, because you don't want it to be pent up. And then you spaz on somebody because they ask you what time it is, and you're like, "Don't you got a fucking phone, dude? Like, I don't. Why are you asking me what time it is? It's 2002, you know." So that's interesting how you took the tarot experience in therapy, and now you added the day-to-day practice, you know, for yourself, and now you're even like offering that service to others, and then you're intertwining it with your love for Broadway. So you were in the theater early, you know, dancing and you're acting. What was it like when you first got that first job on Broadway and you're like, yo, I'm here?
It was amazing. My first opportunity, so my brother actually made his Broadway debut when he was a junior in high school.
Okay, that's dope.
He has a crazy story. Yeah, he's a super talented, was a performer for a long time, is now a choreographer. And so it was always kind of like, I knew that there was a window that had been cracked open for me.
Okay.
That I was going to find a way to climb in somehow or another. And it was we were having a Tony Awards party. He was in the revival of A Chorus Line. And we had a bunch of the cast and company over to watch the Tony Awards. And one of them was the woman who was the casting director for the show. And she had just left the casting office and was now working for a producer. And I started talking to her because I kind of thought producing was what I wanted to do. And I think it's still what I want to do in the long run. I do think that is ahead for me. But I was, curious about what her job was like and what she did all day. And I just kind of blurted out, like, you don't need an intern, do you? And she said, no, do you want to be one? And like in that moment, I knew that there was a shift. And I knew that like this was my opportunity to jump in and like start learning and start meeting people and start finding my way into this in my own way versus like, being an actor, going to auditions and like trying to do it that way. And that was an amazing job and I loved it. But I was an intern, right? And I had, I wasn't getting college credit for anything. I was just kind of free labor, having my restaurant gigs on the side so I could pay my rent. And I did that for the first several years I lived in New York. I didn't get a full-time job until I was like 25. I was like, I said I was a 25-year-old intern and I was like, I need a job or a full-time real job. Can't be interning anymore. And that was the point when I got the job in the PR office.
So doesn't that grind you go through though make you appreciate it so much more? And I mean, we can't dismiss, the window that was cracked open, but that's life. Like if
absolutely, you have to recognize that the opportunity is there in order to take advantage of it,
and not be afraid to put yourself out there to be rejected. Because sure, you could go do all these auditions, and I mean that's soft rejection, because you're in a pool of people, and odds aren't great just auditioning for anything. It's just like, applying for a job online and then interviewing. It's like, I mean, sure, there's an opportunity, but expectations are tempered. But when you're in somebody's face and it's like, you need an intern? Like, that's real. They got to make a decision like right there. And they could come to regret their decision tomorrow, but they got to give you an answer like right now, know?
Yeah. Or but also there's always the answer of, you know what, let me think on that. And then it's your responsibility to do the follow-up and make sure that they are continuing to think on it until you do get an answer. And that's something I learned in like my PR life, right? In pitching, you're like out there, you have to pitch a story to a journalist for a client. And, you don't hear back because journalists get quite literally thousands of emails a day. And so, they're more likely to open an email from someone whose name they noticed and they recognize and they're familiar with. But also, you got to follow up. And I I love getting a no because it's like, great, I can do something with that. Like, give me the no, because I'll stop stalking you and following you and asking you if you still are you sure? Are you maybe right? Like, no, I will stop that shit the second that you say thanks, not now, or no, thank you, or that's not a fit, or this doesn't feel right now. Whatever whatever it is.
The no, it really does open so many doors because you stop, and the knowing the name thing, I think that's so important. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist here, okay, but I will say that the one thing about COVID that truly scares me is that we do everything virtual now, and it's hard to meet people virtually.
Yeah.
It's hard to catch a vibe, feel somebody out, virtually, because I read body language. I am great at reading body language. From this interview, I know if we talk about Tara and Broadway, you get excited. You know what I mean? Like, and with a mask on or in Zoom, sometimes it's hard to read body language. And I'm afraid that we're going to create a space where everything is done efficiently because we can do it from home. But at the same time, it's like, I like people. I like catching vibes. I like to
right. That social isolation is really hard.
Oh yeah, no, it made me crazy.
Yeah.
That's what actually pushed me to go into therapy, was the social isolation, because I'm a people watcher. I like to go to the bar, and it's not just about going to the bar to get drunk or even interact with people. It's just to be amongst people and like feel the room,
Yep.
All right, so let's pivot back to Tara.
Okay.
Like, let's explain to people, like including me, what exactly tarot is and what it means.
Yeah. So I like to say that tarot is a physical or a visual representation of information that you hold within yourself. So it either resides like in your heart or in your gut. You know this deep in your heart or deep in your gut, but that information hasn't quite made it up to your head yet. And so this is a physical card or in front of you that says, this is what you're trying to say to yourself. And so like the easiest way I would say is like, it's like texting yourself a meme, right? It's like, this is a visual representation of how I feel or what I need in this moment.
Okay. And so for the skeptics, right? How would you sell a skeptic on the validity of tarot?
I would say, keep the skepticism and like let's do it and see what happens and see how you feel and see if it feels like it resonates for you and if it aligns for you. The cards never lie, right? Like these cards, it's always the cards you need, like the right cards for whatever given moment it is, whatever is being explored or being sometimes it's like you have a specific question that you want to ask. Sometimes it's a more general idea. Sometimes it's what do the cards have to say. But this sort of knowing that you have within yourself, the cards tap into that. And they're able to help you see it through a different perspective.
Okay, so I do have some religious listeners, right?
Absolutely.
And what would you say to those who, may say that's not of God?
Sure. I would say that everything is of God. If it's here, it's of God. God created everything. So if you feel as though it doesn't align for you and it doesn't feel right for you, then by all means, please don't participate. But if you have major resistance towards it, that could be information also. It's like, what are we afraid of exploring through methods that we maybe can't always explain?
I think that's so interesting because it goes back to trying, things once. For one, how do you realize what you like if you don't know what you don't like?
Yeah.
And you can't be fearful of exposure to new things because, let me think of something.
Oysters.
Oh,
ever have oysters?
I love oysters.
Me too. Love oysters.
I'm trying to think of something that I don't like, but I didn't know that I didn't like it.
Mm.
You know what? Let's talk about a bad date. You
Okay.
don't know that you don't like somebody can be super attractive. You see
Yeah.
them, you go, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know that that person is super annoying. Their conversation is awful. Their people skills are subpar
Right.
until you spend time with them.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if you go past that, all of that stuff is good, and you know the physical's not there. You know when you turn off the lights, you don't know it's a bad experience until you have it.
Yeah.
And you don't know that someone else may be, more pleasing until you actually have that experience. So again, I'm all about having new experiences. So let's talk about this tarot deck that we're going to be pulling from today.
Awesome. So today I'm using the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. This is sort of like the mother of modern tarot decks. There are, it was created by, or drawn rather, by a woman named Pamela Coleman Smith, I think back in the 1920s. And she was kind of the first to take each of the cards' meanings and sort of translate them into imagery that takes that card meaning and gives you a really visual representation versus the way you might see it on like a traditional deck of playing cards, right?
Okay.
You would see like two hearts versus seeing an image of what those two hearts mean.
Okay.
So that's the deck we're using today. All tarot decks are structured the same way. So you have two parts. You've got the major arcana and the minor arcana. The major arcana are our magic cards. So when they show up, we pay special attention to them. There are 22 of them, and they correspond to the human soul's evolutionary journey. So it starts with the Fool at 0, which is the numberless number. And the Fool is that kind of fresh, naive, trusting energy, ready to take the leap, and away we go, trying anything once. Yes, that's very much the energy of the Fool. And then it goes all the way up through the World, which is card number 21. So there are 22 of them, but because we start with 0, we only go to 21. And that is completion energy. So that's that whole, healed, which is where holy came from, holy energy. So that very sort of completion energy there. The minor arcana is set up like a traditional deck of playing cards. So you have 4 suits, ace through 10. Those are called pip cards. And then you have 4 court cards instead of 3. So there will be a king and a queen, and then a knight and a page. Sometimes you might see prince and princess. Sometimes you might see father, mother, son, and daughter. It depends on the deck.
So no big joker, little joker?
No jokers, because you have a whole arcana, right? Like the major arcana sort of are those trump cards. I don't like to use that word, magic cards. So
you don't stay at the Trump Tower down the street.
So the minor arcana is like that traditional playing deck. And those picture cards, those court cards, they can correspond to the characteristics of those cards within yourself, or that could be like people in your life that have those sort of characteristics. Also, those 4 suits, they correspond to our 4 elements. So we have wands, that's our fire. That's our passion, our drive, our creativity, the stuff that lights us up, that gets us out of bed in the morning.
Okay.
Our cups is water. That's our feelings, our emotions, and our intuition.
Okay.
Air, those are swords. And that is anything sort of like mental. So knowledge, intellect, communication, technology, language, anything like that. And then finally, we've got the earth, which is discs or coins or pentacles. And that is the physical, the material, the manifest here.
Okay.
So I know it's a lot of information, but I think it kind of helps having a sense of it as we get into this.
Absolutely. And I just want to take a second to commend you for your PR background there by answering something without answering something.
Oh, yeah.
In our little when we were talking about the towers and whatnot and words we don't like to use. I loved it. It was just just great media training by getting it across. You got the point across. I hit you with the follow-up to see if you would go down that little spiral. You're like, no, we're staying on topic. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I always would tell my clients it doesn't matter what question you're asked, just give the answer you want.
And that's why people on this end, we get so it's
frustrating.
It's super frustrating, especially when you ask a direct question.
Yeah.
And granted, like the podcast makes it easier because it's long form. You got time to get comfortable. You can undress them a little bit. And God forbid, like you're actually doing an in-person podcast and you got like the 30-minute meeting. You have some drinks and stuff, and you're actually just talking, kicking shit, and like, hey, let's get these microphones going. It makes it so much easier. But yeah, man, I feel for the beat writers, those beat reporters who they get one question.
Yep.
And they're hoping to get a legitimate answer. And if you're a no-name, nobody, they're just going to start talking and saying what the hell they want to say because they have good PR teams around them, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the situation and the person, and there's so many factors, but yeah.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I look at a lot. I consume a lot of sports media, and my God, you just see the press conference, and you go,
see that's a press conference like that is a different situation. Like that's a totally different ball game.
Yeah, and I tell you, like some people get mad when they see something. They go like anonymous sources, like, no, I want to know who said it. No. That's where the best information comes because you actually get the person to tell you what's on their mind, and you go, okay, hey, you can't cite this. Hey, you can't put this and this together.
It's off the record.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this is off the record. This is on the record. But then you can frame what you're gonna write based on all of this off the record stuff, but you can use it as a reference point. You just can't say it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And like I mean, it's
yes.
It's
all right.
Let's get back.
You ready to cut these cards?
Absolutely.
Now, are we doing a reading for you specifically, or would you like to do a general reading? Anyone that's hearing this and listening, I'm sure that something's going to resonate. They're listening for a reason. There's a message that's going to be in here for them.
Well, let's do it for me.
Great. Do you have a specific question or theme or something that you want to focus this on?
Specific theme? I don't know. Let's talk about progression. I mean, over the next 5 to 10 years, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. I will say also that tarot to me is not a tool to sort of predict the future or see the future.
Okay.
That can be a very common misconception.
Okay.
The tarot is more about tapping into, like I said, that information you hold within yourself. So anything that's like a possible future thing is always a possibility, but it's also where you're tapping in that particular moment. You could take, if we had done this tomorrow or yesterday, it would be a different reading.
All right. So I'm emotionally unavailable. Let's tap into my emotional unavailability,
Okay. Great. So first thing you're going to do is, did we do this already? No, you didn't cut the cards.
No, I've not.
Great. So you're going to tell me when to stop.
Stop.
All right. So I think that the best, we're going to pull 3 cards. I think the best spread to do today, which is sort of the meaning of each of the 3 cards, is called the spread, is what will help you,
okay,
what will hinder you, and what is your unrealized or your untapped potential.
I like it.
All right. So this first card, this is what will help you. Oh my goodness gracious. It's the King of Cups. It's the King of Emotions. I think this is saying you are not emotionally unavailable. You just have a belief that you are. You have the King of Cups. So remember I said we have each of these 4 suits, right? And the cups, that's our feelings, our emotions, and our intuition. And the King is the top, sort of like the top, the highest expression of this suit. It is the fullest expression of this suit. And so this is saying, like, you have that king energy, that very grounded, stable, foundational emotional foundation is there for you. That's what's going to help you. It's just like knowing that you already have it.
That makes sense. That hits me. It has me deep in my head a little bit.
Like you might have been emotionally unavailable at one point, but you said you've been going to therapy, you've been doing some work, you've been hosting this podcast and talking to people and having new perspectives coming your way. Like that'll chip away at that unavailability at the heart and open that up.
Yeah, it has. It definitely has. And like, if we're being honest here, let me get a little bit vulnerable. There's definitely been some things that's changed in my life that's made me more emotionally available person, because I'm emotional as hell.
Yeah.
But
Many of us are.
I got turtle energy. I got the thick outer shell, but once you break that shell, it's
when's your birthday?
November 18th. I'm a Scorpio.
But I wonder what your rising is. Because that's you're describing a Cancer right there. And so that sort of hard outer shell, and it could go for Scorpio too, very much so, right? The Scorpion, that hard outer shell, the soft gooey stuff's all on the inside. And Scorpios are very, very, very deep. Very deep.
Yeah.
The depth of water there is, and it's again a water sign. King of water, King of Cups.
Okay.
So it's going to help you to just keep diving toward that depth, that availability, anytime like the big feelings start coming on, instead of leaning back from them, leaning into them, which I know is really hard as someone who has feelings that sometimes feel like a tsunami that might actually drown me. But I've survived 100% of the emotional experiences I've had.
Yes, we all have, and shit, it's just,
it's not going to kill you.
It's not. And it's just like, do I want to make myself available, for the no, right?
But that's what's going to help you.
The no, it's crazy that we go back to this no, but the no is so important, because if you don't get to know, there's this whole chase and this holding back and this.
Well, it's also like a displacement of energy, right? Like it's a displacement of focus. When you don't get that no, you're continuing, like you say, to push energy and push focus and put like in the direction that's not serving like your best timeline, right? So like, let's redirect that energy back to where it can be most helpful and effective.
I'm liking this already.
I'm so glad. That's my pleasure.
Happy I could give that to you.
Thank you. Shall we see what's going to hinder you?
Yeah, let's see what's going to hinder me.
All right. Oh, yeah. So this is the 7 of Swords. Okay. So remember, our swords are that's like our air. That's our mental. So that's knowledge, intellect, language, communication, technology, all of that.
Okay.
We see this 7, this guy's sort of like running off with 5 swords. The 7's all about mistruths. Okay. It's all about keeping information hidden from yourself or others. So this is saying what's going to hinder you is some of that misdirection that we were talking about, but also like not being fully truthful, not bringing 100% of your truth in every moment, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels not good.
Oh man, we don't want to tell. You want to avoid the conflict if you can, and just keep some stuff hidden, right? It's not.
No, not at all. This is literally saying hiding things is going to hinder you. Literally what this card says. Hiding things will hinder you. It will only make things worse. Not necessarily worse, but like harder and more challenging and less pleasurable and enjoyable. And like, why would you want that? Like, why would you not want as much ease and joy and pleasure and play and delight? And right? Like, why wouldn't we want these higher vibrations?
I don't have a good answer for you. That's
because we want them.
I'm triggered.
Thank you for sharing that.
That hits home. It
Mm-hmm.
really hits home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm kind of at a loss for words right now because I'm
Mm.
over here processing. I got the wheels
Mm-hmm.
spinning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like shit. You're definitely talking to me, Miss Emily.
Yeah. But here's the thing, right? Like, I'm not even one doing the talking, big baby. Like, this is you. I'm just channeling this shit. This is all coming. This is information you already hold within yourself. You know this. You know that the thing that's going to help you is diving more deeply into the depths of your feelings, your instincts, your emotions, your intuition. Like, that is going to help. You know at your core that is helpful. You know at your core, hiding shit is not going to help you. You know that. It's just you're just reaffirming it for yourself.
Framing it is everything. And I like at the beginning when we talked about this, it's about the cards help you realize things that you already know, kind of like, focus your energy on these things.
Mm-hmm.
And of the three cards that we've already pulled, I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna have something to walk away from when we're done here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
I'm glad. So we have one more, like you said, and this card is your untapped potential. So like this is something that you have access to that you haven't even begun to scratch the surface of. This is the Star. So this is a major arcana card.
Okay.
The Star comes a little more than 2/3 of the way through the major arcana. So you can see here it's numbered 17, so it's the 18th card. And this is the card that comes immediately after what many think is the scariest card of the tarot, which is the Tower card. The Tower card is the moment where it all comes crumbling down. And the Star is that moment of hope in the aftermath of everything crumbling, where you can see that you're now going to be rebuilding from a much stronger foundation. You have so we said that the major arcana is the human soul's evolutionary journey, right? Mm-hmm. So we start out on this journey as this very trusting fool. We learn some lessons from teachers, from parental type figures, from spiritual and religious leaders, from relationships, from our own inner strength, from like going within, experiencing sort of like the turns of fortune, seeing how things can weigh out. Like, right, we're going through all this process, these learnings, learning how to transform one thing into another, learning about loss and about our shadows and about how everything can come crumbling down. And then we get to this point where it's like, but I still have some hope. It's like that pinprick of light at the end of the tunnel. That's the Star.
Okay.
Yeah. And this card is inverted, right? It's upside down. So some people like to read inversions, some people don't. A lot of people might read them as like the negative expression of the card. So this would say like, there is no hope. No, that's not how I read this.
Okay.
Because I believe that every card holds the full expression, right, of the spectrum of its meaning.
Okay.
My favorite way to read inversions is that it's the internal expression. So it's like you haven't even begun to see your own star shine yet.
Shine bright like a diamond.
Mm-hmm. But for yourself, big baby, has nothing to do with anybody else. It's for you, of you, for you.
Yo.
And you haven't even scratched the surface.
I appreciate that. I mean, I really appreciate this experience because, and I'll say to anybody listening that if you, for one, if you don't see that, like I'm at a loss for words right now because I'm actually like deep in thought and I'm trying to like balance these thoughts that I'm having about these cards and still do a productive podcast. Not the easiest thing in the world, but let's compartmentalize for a second. If nothing to take away from this is this was 15, 20 minutes of just introspection, right? Just looking at yourself and saying, how does this apply to me, and where can I get better, right? Hey, just be emotional and fuck how it makes people feel. Like, I mean, obviously respect boundaries, but like don't hold back who you are, because right, you are who you are, and they're gonna love it or they're gonna hate it for the most part, right? You don't gotta sneak around, just tell the truth. And again, they're gonna take it or they're gonna leave it, but give people the opportunity to make decisions for the real you. And I kind of concluded with the untapped potential is if you focus in on these things, then there is hope, and the star does shine brighter, because you're not holding back things that are truly natural. Like that's how I understand it for myself. And shit, man, this is dope.
Yeah.
Super dope.
Yeah, it's cool, right?
It is, man. And I see how, oh my God, like it's almost like a cheat code for a therapist.
It can be really helpful and really inspiring and insightful, right? Really, really insightful.
Yeah.
We don't think about the fact that we have neurons in our guts, right? Like the same things that fire in our brains are in our guts. We try and move through the world just using our brains, but that we have so much more knowledge embedded in ourselves.
Yeah,
and it's just a way to tap into it.
It really is. And the idea that we should always move with like our logical brain is just absolutely crazy. Because what happens if you're using, logic and stuff, you're not framing, you're not providing context, and I can put it like in a sports perspective. You talk about analytics and people say, well, based on this formula, this is going to happen. Here's the probability of this happening. Okay. Are those opportunities properly contextualized, or are we putting it in a vacuum,
Right.
I mean,
right, because a game in Denver is going to be a very different game than a game in Miami.
Right. And a game in New York in August is different from a game in New York in December. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, let's properly contextualize these things, Oh man, context counts. Hey, a quick question for you back to your Broadway time, okay?
Sure.
Because I still want to, do a couple of interview questions as we're starting to wrap up. What was like your starstruck moment where you had to like take a step back and find words?
Who did I get starstruck over? Okay, so this is so funny. This is so funny. I had worked on A Raisin in the Sun starring Denzel Washington.
Okay.
His co-star was LaTanya Richardson Jackson, Sam Jackson's wife.
Okay.
Lots of other major people. Lots of major people came to see the play. The Obamas came. It was like in the middle of his second term. It was so cool. And the director and I are dear friends. We became friends working on that show and since have stayed such. And we were out to dinner a couple of years later. And we're sitting in a restaurant on 44th Street and 6th Avenue. And I started to like lose my mind. And he was like, what? Can I swear on your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. I can't believe I didn't ask that question like before the end. Usually I'm dropping F-bombs left and right.
And I'm sorry I didn't tell you.
No, it's really fine. Yeah. He looks at me, he goes, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I was like, and I looked at the bartender, I said, does Amy Sedaris come here a lot? And he was like, no, not really. But Andy Cohen comes here all the time. And I was like, what? And like Amy Sedaris, who's an actress, she's the sister of David Sedaris, the satirist. You know, she is someone who like I just think is like the most insane, wonderful, like wild, unapologetically herself human that is just like so weird and just like gives zero fucks about it and is like, yep, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. And I was so starstruck over her walking in after having worked on this play with this like, you know, celebrity director with Denzel Washington and like who I was just kind of like, okay, Dad, sure. You know, like that's kind of the vibe that I had with Denzel. I was like, all right, Dad, whatever you say, you're in charge. But like, I lost my mind over Amy Sedaris. And she, you know, she's just like a downtown chill celebrity, like out here doing her own thing.
And that's why I asked the question, because many people who I've been around and talked to, who's been around like numerous celebrities, you'd be shocked at the ones that kind of take your breath away versus the ones where you kind of have a certain expectation because of this person. It's like, I mean, yeah, that person's cool, you know, cool to you, but like me.
And don't get me wrong, like Denzel was wonderful to work with. We were not like, you know, we were cordial and friendly, and I was basically with him for anything PR related throughout the process because his team was based in LA and the New York folks had other stuff they were working on. So like I was with him all the time at all of his media things. And the first time I met him, I was very nervous to meet him. But I was, you know, I was just kind of like, oh, you're just like here to do a really good job. Cool. I am too. Let me know if you're willing to do these parts of your job so then I can go do mine. Because it was like, will you do this interview? Can we have this journalist come to your dressing room, or would you rather do it on the phone? Can I schedule this, you know, video interview for you? And we would ask his publicist all this stuff, and they would say, just go ask him. Like, just go ask him. He's going to tell you if he wants to do it or not. Just go ask him. And so we did. I did. And it, you know, it was a lot of fun and it was cool. And, but also, you know, he's well aware of like his position in the world. And so, you know, he can't just like go walking down 8th Avenue and grab a cup of coffee between shows, right? Like
pandemonium.
Right. He's got to like stand outside of his stage door with his hands in his pockets and like keep his head down if he wants to get some air. He can't go anywhere.
You know, that's
a different experience.
That's why they all live in LA, because they get to blend in amongst each other, you know, like people, you know, during the pandemic, people talked about like, well, with taxes and California shut down, LA is going to, no, it's not, because LA is literally the only place in the world where the most famous people have places where they can almost be normal.
Right. Well, I will say, for the most part, people leave celebrities alone in New York. For the most part.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, coming out of a stage door kind of situation is a different story.
Right.
And yes, like Denzel is a little bit of a different story if he starts getting recognized, you know, because that's the other thing, like the crowd that can grow.
Yeah, because Denzel is like A+ list, you know, like he's like, it's just different.
Right. But Amy Sedaris and Andy Cohen can walk down the street themselves, no problem. Yeah.
Anyways, Emily, this has been great.
Yay.
I really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes.
Any last parting words before we stop recording?
No, I mean, if anybody's interested in booking with me, you can do that on my website. You can either find me on my Instagram, Emily Ann, ANNENCG, and through my link tree there, or you can go to my website, which is EmilyMcgillEntertainment.com.
All right, man. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Don't sign off yet, though. I'm just going to end the recording.
Thank you.